They erased it from the map in just 3 months. A city so powerful, so feared, that it once ruled the ancient world with an iron fist and whispers in the dark. Yet, Nineveh vanished. But what really happened inside its golden walls, behind the silk curtains of its temples, within the shadows of its blood-soaked rituals? Today, you will cross the gates of the forgotten empire that dared to defy time and paid the ultimate price. If this kind of journey through the lost chapters of history moves something inside you, don't just be a spectator. Subscribe now. Activate the bell. I'm building a community of seekers, those who question the past to understand the present, and this is just the beginning. They erased it from the map in just 3 months. A city so powerful, so feared, that it once ruled the ancient world with an iron fist and whispers in the dark. Yet, Nineveh vanished. But what really happened inside its golden walls, behind the silk curtains of its temples, within the shadows of its blood-soaked rituals? Today, you will cross the gates of the forgotten empire that dared to defy time and paid the ultimate price. If this kind of journey through the lost chapters of history moves something inside you, don't just be a spectator. Subscribe now. Activate the bell. I'm building a community of seekers, those who question the past to understand the present. And this is just the beginning. Imagine a city where women didn't just bear children or serve wine, but commanded armies and bent kings to their will. In Nineveh, power wore perfume. Girls as young as 10 were taken to a secret temple known only by a symbol, etched in stone, never spoken aloud. There they were trained in 7 languages, the art of seduction, and methods of influence so precise they resembled hypnosis. These weren't courtesans. They were statecraft weapons, living instruments of diplomacy and destruction. One such woman, only 18, was sent alone to the court of Babylon. In less than a year, without raising a blade or threatening a siege, she convinced a rival king to surrender fertile lands as a gift. No armies marched, no blood was spilled, just whispers in candlelit chambers and a single flawless smile. This was the true war Nineveh waged, one of shadows, desire, and psychological domination. Failure, however, came with no forgiveness. Women who could not manipulate their targets were publicly sacrificed, bathed in molten gold, their deaths a brutal reminder that charm was not a game. The audience would watch in silence, not out of reverence, but fear. In Nineveh, beauty was not soft. It was deadly, exact, and merciless. Behind their flawless appearances, these women harbored the most lethal secrets. Slow poisons, formulas that took weeks to kill, imitating natural diseases. Fragrances laced with toxins, glances that disarmed, and gestures rehearsed to perfection. The seductresses of Nineveh didn't just speak the language of power. They rewrote its grammar. Kings fell, nations bled, and most never knew the source of their ruin. Wore silk and smiled sweetly. Their sanctuary was called the House of Northern Flowers, but there was nothing innocent about it. They memorized military blueprints, encoded messages with hand signals, and practiced every form of mental manipulation known to man, centuries before modern psychology was even born. These women were feared even by their own priests. And they didn't just serve Nineveh. They were Nineveh. Their rituals were secret, their names erased, but the terror they inspired lingered in every corner of the ancient world. To speak of them was to summon them. And even now, thousands of years later, archaeologists speak of finding their chambers with trembling voices, because inside, among the crumbled stone and scorched walls, they found mirrors, not for vanity, but for war, reflective silence, tactical beauty. Descend now into the royal palace, not a place of luxury, but of sacred torment. In its depths lay the immortal essence chamber. Here the king's concubines spent up to 8 hours a day in rites so painful, so excruciating, that only the most devoted endured. Their skin was polished, punctured, and embedded with flecks of silver and gold. Over 3 nights, particles were fused beneath the surface of their flesh until they shimmered under moonlight like living bronze. Shamarat was the name whispered most among them. Her skin glowed as if kissed by a divine flame. Poets sang of her even as she disappeared from history's official scrolls. But Shamarat had secrets beyond beauty. She knew how to kill with a touch. Her perfumes weren't fragrances, they were spells. And when she passed through a room, Silence followed like a shadow. Those chosen as eternal flowers were permitted only to be seen by the king. The rest? They vanished into myth. Some concubines, when age began to steal their radiance, chose ritual suicide, swallowed whole by silence and blood. Others escaped, taking their secrets to foreign lands. Even centuries later, legends speak of desert queens who glowed at twilight and ruled without lifting a blade. It is said they were Shamirat's daughters. Biologically or ideologically, no one knows. But their touch, like hers, left kingdoms trembling. The rituals in the immortal essence chamber were not about vanity. They were about dominance, to become a living icon, to personify the divine. Some concubines were believed to channel celestial forces, performing dances so precise that priests wept. Their steps aligned with constellations. Their breath matched the pulse of drums made from human skin. Beauty wasn't a luxury, it was law, and to break it was blasphemy. Not every woman survived the transformation. Many died under the needle, their skin rejecting the metal, their minds breaking under pressure. But those who did were untouchable, revered, feared. A single look could halt an argument. A whispered word could unmake alliances. In Nineveh, diplomacy was not forged in treaties, but in flesh, sculpted, scarred, and sanctified. Yet even amid such splendor, pain ruled supreme. The palace was not a sanctuary, it was a proving ground, a crucible. You didn't rise in Nineveh, you were forged, pressed into perfection with ritual, flame, and terror. And the price of failure was not exile, it was erasure. Behind the heavy gold doors of Nineveh's courtrooms, justice was a performance. The king didn't just punish, he choreographed suffering. The condemned weren't executed swiftly, they were displayed. Pain was art and death, a lesson etched into the bones of the watching crowd. Esarhaddon, son of the cruel Ashurbanipal, once said, "Let even the gods turn their faces. What I decree, I enact." The first stage of punishment was skinning, delicately, methodically. Salt water poured over open wounds, not for cleansing, but to keep agony alive. No cries, no pleas, only the sound of dripping blood and the soft chant of priests recording the execution into stone tablets. Their mission, to immortalize the king's wrath, word for word, nerve for nerve. Then came the ritual of 7 deaths. The guilty, real or accused, were starved for 3 days in silence. On the 4th day, red-hot bronze needles pierced their eyes. Tongues were torn out, fingers removed. And then the final stages began, too horrifying for scribes to write down. We only know fragments: oil, insects, sunlight. The body disassembled like a sacred text, read backward. The condemned were often not alone. Families, wives, children, servants were punished together. Entire lineages erased in a single decree. This was not about crime, it was about control. About instilling fear so deep it passed down in lullabies, in myths, in the unspoken rules of survival. Nineveh didn't govern, it dominated. And still, people watched. Crowds gathered not to mourn, but to memorize. The lessons of pain were mandatory curriculum. If a child looked away, the mother would guide their face back to the horror. "Remember," she'd whisper, "this is what happens to those who forget who rules us." In Nineveh, obedience was not encouraged. It was engineered. Justice, if you could call it that, was never blind. It saw everything. It calculated. It smiled. And just as quickly, it devoured. Every stone in Nineveh's palace was soaked in stories like these. Some spoken, others too sacred, or too cursed to be repeated. But if you listen closely, you can still hear the echoes. Beneath the surface of Nineveh's glittering palaces lay secrets far darker than even its courts could show. Hidden chambers, carved into the stone belly of the earth, held the most sacred and most terrifying rites of the empire. When the moon was full and silence fell over the city, a door no commoner dared speak of would creak open. The blood of eternity ritual was about to begin. This wasn't punishment, this was worship. Prisoners of war, specifically those of noble lineage, were not executed immediately. They were preserved, fed only honey and wine laced with hallucinogens for 30 days. Their minds bent, their bodies weakened, but their blood, purified. It was believed that noble blood, drained during the full moon, carried the essence of divine strength. The ritual required their hearts to beat, even as they were opened. Inside the central pyramid, tattooed priestesses chanted incantations lost to time. As the blade opened flesh, chants grew louder. Organs were removed while the victim still breathed, not out of cruelty, but precision, each second calibrated to preserve the soul force within. It wasn't enough to kill. One had to consume the power in the right order, at the right hour. That was Nineveh's theology. The remains were burned with oils from extinct plants. The smoke, they believed, carried the victim's final breath to the gods. The king would stand on a golden altar, inhaling the fumes, arms raised to the stars. This was not myth. This was policy. A system designed to fuse political power with metaphysical dominance. Nineveh didn't just conquer land, it claimed souls. What shocks modern scholars most is how meticulous it all was. Records show exact weights of organs, descriptions of skin tone under torchlight, and the time each heart stopped beating. One recovered tablet simply read, "The queen's daughter screamed for 13 seconds. The gods are satisfied." These weren't savages. They were administrators of horror, ritual engineers of divine terror. Even among the executioners, madness was common. Priestesses, some as young as 14, would begin to tremble after years of these rituals. Some lost their minds completely, found walking naked into the desert, muttering songs to gods no longer worshipped. Others disappeared inside the tunnels, never seen again. The walls of Nineveh kept their secrets, but they also devoured their keepers. And still, the empire thrived. Because what outsiders called barbarism, Nineveh called strength. Every ritual, every death, every crimson ceremony carved into the bones of the empire's identity. Power was not simply taken. It was earned in blood, sealed in smoke, and immortalized in silence. Not far from these shadowed chambers, buried beneath the palace, was the greatest treasure of the ancient world, a library no one was meant to find. In 1849, archaeologists uncovered over 30,000 clay tablets, untouched by time. The personal archive of King Ashurbanipal. This wasn't a collection, it was a manifesto. And inside, the soul of Nineveh whispered once more. These tablets contained everything: law codes, hymns, medical texts, even the complete epic of Gilgamesh. But among the clay were darker things: manuals for psychological manipulation, chemical formulas for poisons that killed over weeks, treatises on how to break a man without lifting a sword. One tablet, marked only by the symbol of a crescent moon, listed 7 divine steps to dismantle the will of a rival king. It wasn't fiction. These were instructions. Nineveh's spies, known as the Flowers of Ishtar, used these techniques in foreign courts, in diplomatic missions, even during peace offerings. A concubine sent to a rival as a gift was not a token. She was a weapon, smiling, scented, deadly. And when she struck, it wasn't with blade or poison, but with doubt, seduction, and psychological fracture. Among the most shocking discoveries was a section of medical texts detailing brain surgery. Over 2,600 years ago, trepanation, nerve treatment, and instructions for manipulating behavior through pressure points on the skull. Modern doctors are still trying to understand how such knowledge existed. Some call it divine inspiration, others, simple genius weaponized by cruelty. The texts on astronomy were just as startling. Priestesses with tattooed maps on their bodies, mathematical formulas still unsolved, coordinates for stars not discovered until the modern telescope. Who were these women? Were they oracles, scientists, or both? One thing is clear: Nineveh didn't guess. It calculated. Every movement of heaven and earth recorded in blood and ink. Some say the ink was mixed with human ash. Others claim the clay itself was laced with sacred bone. Whatever the truth, one cannot deny the cold precision behind it all. Nineveh wanted immortality. And in these tablets, horrifying, brilliant, relentless, it found it. Step outside now, breathe the air, and look around. You're in the center of a city that once housed over 100,000 people, a metropolis unlike any other in its time. While the rest of the world struggled with mud huts and crude roads, Nineveh stood as a titan of urban engineering. Its avenues gleamed with polished stone, Its sewers ran clean for miles beneath its foundations. Streets were wide enough for 10 chariots. Districts were meticulously zoned, one for priests, another for artisans, one for the elite. Each had its own laws, its own sentinels, even its own rituals. Families couldn't move without royal approval, not because the king was paranoid, but because Nineveh didn't grow. It expanded with surgical intent. Even beneath its grand design ran something revolutionary. A sewer system so advanced, parts of it functioned 1,000 years after the city fell. Stone canals, angled drains, and aqueducts fed water to bathhouses, temples, and hidden chambers. And ironically, it was through these very canals that the enemy finally found a way in. The pride of Nineveh became its open wound. But before its fall, this was the heartbeat of the empire. Engineers, architects, scholars, all worked together under one creed: that no part of the city should be ordinary. Every doorframe carved, every street aligned to constellations. Nineveh was not built to survive, it was built to be worshipped. And worshipped it was. Foreign diplomats described fainting from the sheer beauty of its golden domes. Musicians from conquered lands were brought in by the hundreds to fill its streets with music. Perfumes from Africa, spices from India, scrolls from Greece, all devoured by a city that wanted the world not as neighbor, but as tribute. As you walk these imagined streets, understand this: Nineveh wasn't just a city, it was a prophecy made stone, a vision of human will, undiluted by mercy, or time. And though its walls may have crumbled, its echo hasn't. In the end, Nineveh wasn't just a city, it was a mirror reflecting the extremes of human brilliance and brutality. We saw how beauty became a weapon, how ritual replaced reason, and how an empire rose on secrets too heavy for time to carry. If this journey shook something inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the channel and take the next step deeper into truth, because history is speaking, and you're meant to hear it. I'm Oliver, and I believe that remembering the past with courage can awaken something sacred in the present. Thank you for walking this path with me. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and never stop seeking.